Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it is, welcome to a new video where we're going to be talking about the books that I've read in the last month. Because going back to the last time I did one of these would be too many. And this video would probably just go on and on and on and on. Which is saying quite something because last month I only read 2 books. But, in my defence, the first one was A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas. Now I'm not going to say too much about this book because I expect you guys already know all about it. It's really popular. It's not my favourite book in the series. That has to go to A Court of Mist and Fury. This book is amazing and reading the series is worth it just for this book. And personally I think it's because A Court of Mist and Fury is so good that the expectation was raised so much higher for A Court of Wings and Ruin. And unfortunately, at least the first half didn't really live up to expectation. I found it a lot slower than I'd have liked, and it took me a while to really get back into it. The second half saved it, I have to admit, and it redeemed the book as a whole, making it much more of an enjoyable read. The second half became very epic, and it kind of returned to the elements that I loved of A Court of Mist and Fury, but still it didn't quite get there. I wanted more from it. I've got a feeling it's because the second book was so good and it's such a high standard that I expected the same from this book, and it unfortunately didn't quite deliver. That being said, on its own, not just because of the page count, it is an epic read. It continues the story of Rhys and Fair, and it continues their story. The underlying bubbling conflict with Tamlin, Lucien, they're all here, they're all present and correct. There's a lot of fighting, a lot of friction. And from a story perspective, it's very good. It's, like I said, it just wasn't quite as good as A Court of Mist and Fury. So at this point, before I move on to the other book I read in June, I thought I'd take a brief gander through the A Court of Thorns and Roses series so far, and show you which ones are my favourite. Though, you kind of already know. Didn't think this through. A Court of Thorns and Roses. When I first read it, I absolutely loved it. It's a retelling of one of my favourite fairy tales, Beauty and the Beast, and it does a very good job of retelling it in a way that I completely fell in love with. Initially, this book got me into the series, I loved it, and I thought, brilliant. Then came along A Court of Mist and Fury, and this book just blew that book out of the water. It tears everything you've read about in A Court of Thorns and Roses to pieces. Shines a completely new light on characters, and suddenly it's like, oh my god. The story of Fair and Rysand in this book is just worth it. I loved getting to know them as characters. I loved getting to know the relationship. I loved everything about this book. It was amazing. And quite possibly one of my favourite books last year. So then we came to A Court of Wings and Ruin, and like I said just now, it just wasn't as good as this one. And I think this one set such a high standard that this one couldn't quite meet up to it. It's a shame, but these things happen. So in order, this is my favourite book. This book kind of went down a little bit in my estimation after reading this one, and this one kind of sits in the middle. It's better than A Court of Thorns and Roses because the second half redeems it slightly, but nowhere near as good as A Court of Mist and Fury. That probably doesn't help anyone in any way, shape or form, but those are my feelings. The second book I read in June was one I've talked about a couple of times on this channel, and it's Who Runs the World by Virginia Bergam. This book is set 6 years in the future, and it's basically a book where almost every man is wiped out by a virus, and uses that as a way to explore what the world would be like without men. I had so many high hopes for this book. I thought it posed a really interesting question, and I thought from going to the launch I thought it was going to do an excellent job. I liked Virginia's writing, and I had really high hopes. I will say the second half redeems the book. The book itself is well written. I think it does achieve its idea of making you think about gender as maybe not just the biological thing, but how you identify with gender. From that idea I think it succeeds. It portrays an interesting world, it examines the world from a new perspective, and gives you something to think about. So while it may not be my favourite Virginia's books, just making you think and posing that initial question, whether you agree with what Virginia's view is or not, I think it's still worth a read just to think about, if nothing else. And I did enjoy it, I didn't hate it. So those were the 2 books that I read in June. It seems pitiful when you look at it like that, doesn't it? 2 books. This one was quite big, I'm trying to gesture at myself now. It's 705 pages. I think I can justify saying I only read 2 books in June. Because this one is a bit of a monster. A good monster, but a bit of a monster nonetheless. I've almost read the equivalent in July already. 2 books in July, so I think we're going to do better in July. But these are the 2 books I read in June. If you've read either of these 2 books, I'd love to know what you thought of them, so let me know in the comments. And thank you so much for watching. If you like this video and want to see more, then hit the like or subscribe button and that funny bell thing. Whatever that does. And until next time, I'll see you later.